Well, I think that's an outstanding overview of almost every topic I wanted to cover today. But before we go any further, Mr. Griffin, I'd like to backtrack to the time of the first national central bank. You know, few Americans are aware of this invisible financial domestic war that began, well, you might argue, before 1776 and persists even to this day. I've unveiled, I think, in my upcoming book here, 3 failed central banks that led up to the Federal Reserve. I actually refer to the War of 1812 as the Central Banking War of 1812 due to the fact that it seems to have been fomented by the powers that be over Congress's failure to grant a charter to the Second Bank of the United States. The head of the London Rothschilds Bank at the time predicted the war due to this American stubbornness and refusal to accept a central bank. Now, although America did win the War of 1812 militarily, we actually lost the financial battle. The Second Bank of the United States was soon established thereafter, and it required the, I think, Herculean willpower of President Andrew Jackson to slay the beast several decades later. If I could share a quote here, he said, "The bold effort of this central bank had made to control the government are but premonitions of the fate that await the American people should they be deluded into a perpetuation of this institution or the establishment of another like it. I am one of those who do not believe that a national debt is a national blessing, but rather a curse to the republic, inasmuch as it is calculated to raise around the administration of moneyed aristocracy and dangerous to the liberties of a country." And that's quite wordy there, but I think it's clear he was pointing out that these central banks pose a considerable threat to the nation. And you know, it wasn't long before the banking cartel, well, they were back at work. Some historians claim that the Civil War found its roots in an attempt to implement interest-bearing notes and another central bank. President Lincoln refused the usurious 36% notes and instead printed $200 million called greenbacks, thanks to the green ink used in the back. They bore no interest, and contrary to the saying not worth a greenback, the bills were eventually redeemed. Unfortunately, following his assassination, the interest-bearing notes were again issued in the United States. And this brings me to the question of the creature from Jekyll Island. You know, the 1907 panic clearly laid the framework, if you will, for the Federal Reserve. J.P. Morgan helped save the nation, and folks were not happy, though, that one man wielded so much power. And, well, here we are in Jekyll Island, Georgia.
Well, yeah, that, too, is a pretty good overview of the history of central banking in America. And I think just to, put a summary on that, the fact that emerges in my mind is that when people understand what central banking means, it means a private banking cartel which has been legally given the power to create the nation's money, and that's basically a monopoly over a nation's money supply that's given to a private group of bankers. That's what really central banking is all about, wherever you find it in the world. It's kind of masked by those benign words, central banking. That doesn't sound too bad. I mean, banking is good, isn't it? And central is good. So it masks the reality that central banking is a private cartel that's been given a monopoly over a nation's money supply by corrupt and or ignorant politicians. And so that's what we're talking about. And so naturally that gives tremendous power, not only financial power, but political power to those who operate the central banks of the world. And therefore we're not surprised, we shouldn't be surprised when we're reading through history to find out that the people that can do this are constantly, at the attention. They're constantly working to promote this kind of a banking system in every country in the world. They never go to sleep. It's much in their interest to keep trying until finally they get it passed, and then once it's passed, then they keep trying to expand it, make it more powerful, and make it bigger, more better sort of thing. So yes, even though in this country that we had a tremendous awareness, especially under the regime of Andrew Jackson, under the presidency of Andrew Jackson, a tremendous awareness of the evils of central banking. Everybody gets tired of the battle. Other things come up, and as we have prosperity, people lower their guard, start thinking about the pleasures of life, recreation, sports, making money, getting rich, traveling the world, all of these things, and they lower their guard because life is so good. And especially under those conditions, then the central bankers are usually able to slip their way into Congress or the legislature of whatever country in the world we're talking about. First thing you know, they got their central bank back in place. And we saw that happen, as you pointed out, 3 times, actually the 4th time, if you want to count all of the attempts, in America, and the Federal Reserve System was only the last of that long sequence. Well, we're going to have to get rid of it again, as we did the previous 2 or 3 times. But even when we do get rid of the Federal Reserve, the battle won't be over because those guys will still be waiting for prosperity to return and life to get comfortable, and then they'll be back at it again. So the old adage that, eternal vigilance is necessary for liberty, we might add the word prosperity, is more true now than ever before.
Very well said. And, the huge cracks that are finally being seen here that you alluded to earlier in our current economic system. Against that backdrop, I'd like to pull the curtain back here, if we could, and expose the wizard behind this fractional reserve banking system. Although maybe 1 in 100 people are truly aware of the process, at the end of the trading day, don't banks essentially create money out of, as you say, debt or thin air?
Well, yes, that's how all money is created. It's out of debt, because it would be just, to simplify this for people to understand, let's just imagine that you went to I guess you buy government bonds at the post office. I don't know, you used to buy them there. I haven't bought any in so many years, but maybe at the bank. You go someplace and you buy, let's say, a $100 government bond. All right. Now, what is the bond? It's debt. It's an IOU. The government gives you this bond, nicely printed up, nice, curlicues around the edges, and it says $100 on each of the corners, and it's a big piece of paper, and you give them $100 in Federal Reserve notes or whatever you do. But now you've got the bond. Well, that bond represents debt. It's an IOU from the government. Now, you could take that bond, and if the bond said anybody that holds this bond can take it to the government and get $100 in Federal Reserve notes, if that's what the bond says, and basically that's what they do say. Sometimes they have a person's name on them, but usually it's a bearer bond. Whoever holds the things can take them and get the $100 in return for them. So if you have this bond and you wanted to trade it with somebody that had something of value, say they had a nice chair in the attic that they aren't using, and you thought, I'd sure use that chair in my recreation room. What do you want for it? And they said, well, $100. And you can say, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you my bond. Will you give me the chair? The bond is good for $100, right? Yeah, that's okay. I'll swap the chair for a $100 bond. Well, you see, that's when bonds become money, because you can exchange them. It's a medium of exchange, but it's nothing but debt. Well, there's little things called Federal Reserve notes with the denominations of 1, 5, 10, 20, 50, 100, and so forth, are exactly the same as bonds. They're just debt, but we call them money, and we are used to swapping them around. But all money is that way today in the world. Money is debt. And if all of those debts were paid back, if all those bonds were paid back, all of the private and public debts were paid back, there would be no money in circulation. Those 1s, 10s, 20s, 50s, 100s, and so forth, and all the checkbook money besides would disappear. Those little nothings would go back into the bank vaults or back into the computer chips or back into the ink wells from which they came. And there would be no money at all in circulation. It's an amazing fact. But that's the reality of our monetary system today, and that's basically the reason that things are not going the way we want them to, because the purchasing power of these nothings, is getting eroded. They keep creating more and more and more of them, and the goods and services that are available to bid against those little pieces of money are not expanding as rapidly. So as the money supply grows more rapidly than the supply of goods and services, then the prices go up to compensate for it. And we've got this thing called inflation, which means the loss of purchasing power. It means the loss of our wealth, the loss of our savings. I mean, they're actually stealing this money from us. It's a taxation in a sense, but we don't know it. We don't see it. We don't understand it. Most people don't. So it's a hidden taxation. And at the end of, let's just say the end of our lifetime, the Federal Reserve System has been in existence now about 100 years. But if you look at the chart, at the end of about a 70-year cycle, with the inflation rate that has been going on, basically here in the United States, the loss of purchasing power is roughly about 97% of all that we've earned. At the end of a lifetime, these people have taken from us, through this hidden mechanism of inflation, this hidden taxation, they have taken 97% of everything we have earned and saved. And the average person doesn't even know it. And they don't understand why their standard of living is going down instead of up. But that's the answer.